Welcome to Saga Sessions, a show where we explore, analyze, and discuss our favorite stories. We are here to talk about Season 2 of Amazon's The Rings of Power. There have been a lot of, or I should say, there has been a lot of negativity surrounding The Rings of Power in general.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Especially regarding Season 1, which I reviewed on this YouTube channel. You can watch that review by clicking on the card above. But I've been looking forward to breaking down and discussing Season 2 for quite some time, and I have the perfect person with me today in Andrew, a master of Tolkien lore.
I don't know whether I'm a master, but I do know quite a bit of Tolkien, yes.
Andrew, before we dive into the story, can you share with me your experience with The Rings of Power from Season 1 to Season 2? Just in general, how did you feel about it? Is it something that excited you, and are you looking forward to more?
Yes, and yes, I was impressed, and because I'm a Tolkien, how can I say, freak, and I just thought that exploration of the second age of the Tolkien universe was something I had been looking forward to, and to see various character acts and to see that world put onto the screen, for me, was very refreshing. So I'm looking forward to more of it, to be honest.
In my previous breakdown of Season 1, I spoke about how Amazon was not the only studio out there who wanted the television rights to The Lord of the Rings. Netflix wanted to adapt almost like a Marvel approach, meaning they would do a movie on Aragorn, they do a TV show on Gandalf, a story on Gollum. Whereas HBO, they were also in on these sweepstakes, and they wanted to totally remake The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings as a miniseries, similar to what they did with Game of Thrones. And then Amazon, they said, hey, how about we do a show about the Second Age? And I was just curious, of those three options, what do you think would have been the best approach?
Interesting question. And to be quite frank with you, I would have enjoyed all three. But based upon what I saw of the HBO take on Game of Thrones, that would have been fascinating indeed to see that. But nevertheless, I think, what we have received thus far, it's pretty interesting regardless of what those other, iterations may or may not have been. And I think the one that Netflix promised, I think right now, based upon what's happened to the Marvel universe, and, a lot of them, they're pumping out duds, to be quite frank.
Agreed.
I think that approach perhaps would have, bombed too. So I think exploring that second age, that period where not so many folks are familiar with it, I think was a great idea. And I think there's still a huge amount of potential for it, to be quite honest.
I agree with everything you're saying. But there are a lot of haters out there who would say,
Indeed.
well, this isn't really the Second Age. Yeah. Amazon's getting it wrong. Before I proceed, let me just tell you guys right now, full spoilers. The stranger is Gandalf. They finally revealed that. And Gandalf does not arrive in the Second Age of Middle-earth in Tolkien's lore, and a lot of people are very angry about that. Mm-hmm. But I think it's great that we are introduced to a younger version of Gandalf. I'm okay with the liberties that they are taking in order to give us more interesting stories and bringing us more familiar characters. So what Andrew and I are going to try to accomplish with this video is this. There's a lot of hate out there surrounding the Rings of Power, but he and I both enjoy it to a degree, and we want to offer a more balanced alternative to the internet. So hopefully we accomplish that together today. Mm-hmm. And I say we dive into episode 1, Elven Kings Under the Sky.
Let's go for it. Yeah.
So in the conclusion of Season 1, it was confirmed that Halbrand is Sauron. And Sauron seems to have this little scheme going on with Adar, who, by the way, changed actors. Joseph Mawle was replaced with Sam Hazeldine, and right off the bat, I was very unhappy when I learned that that was the case, but I thought Sam Hazeldine did a very good job.
He did.
taking over the role of Adar. But we open up the season with a flashback, and it is a different looking Sauron.
Yeah.
Addressing the orcs.
My favorite episode, I think, of all of them, is that first one. Yeah. Why? Because we got to see something, how can I say that there was hinted at about what happened at the end of the first age and of the Tolkien universe, with a great big calamitous battle between the forces of good and the forces of evil. And we got to see the aftermath of that horrendous battle, which most of the evil was wiped out. However, we get to see that the remnants are now congregating around Sauron, and he's trying to rally them, if you will, and tell them that renew the struggle, but under a different type of banner. In this instance, he wants to talk about the inner world, in which he eventually submits himself to. However, what's left of Morgoth's armies, they're not too keen on it. And so, I thought it was a brilliant episode personally, but what's your take on it, Colin?
Well, I loved the beginning.
Yeah.
I was kind of on the edge of my seat because I didn't quite know what was going on. We see Sauron, the person who we presume to be Sauron. He is Sauron, but at the time I wasn't too sure. Addressing the orcs, we see Adar listening in, and he doesn't seem too convinced or too thrilled with what Sauron is saying. And then Adar pulls out the crown of Morgoth, and he kills Sauron.
The symbolism is right there for those who are familiar with the books or familiar with the stories, like Colin and I are. And so it was like, we'll finally get to see something we've always used our imaginations about. And it was then an exploration of things and themes, which was like, that's cool, that's interesting. And then to see the orcs basically turning against Sauron was like, wow. But then again, if you look at what had taken place in the first age, then it does make sense. So
in lore, like in Tolkien's lore, does Sauron die? Does he get killed?
Well, we're always in the first stage, which I don't want to belay, but this is not a video about the first stage. But in the first stage, he was, among other things, he could be a vampire, he could be a demon lord, he could be a great wolf, he could be a great monster, he could be many things. And he had the ability to change into a fair form, meaning that of a human or that of an elf. And he did that multiple times to disguise himself and to achieve his goals. And so we do know, as is hinted at in, I think it's like episode 7 or 8 of the second season, that Morgoth was also punishing Sauron and was also training him in a certain way. That was how Morgoth got his little kicks, if you will.
Right.
And so we do know that Sauron had the ability, and it's intimate that he had the ability to be utterly crushed, but be able to come back again because of the tortures he had endured in the first stage. So,
I think he does hint at something very similar to that when he's talking to Celebrimbor, who he has chained up to the workshop. He says, I'm treating you the way Morgoth treated me.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Right? So...
Angband was an interesting place. Yeah.
Right. So Sauron is... This version of Sauron is killed by Adar. Adar takes control of the orcs, and for an unspecified amount of time, the blood of Sauron is buried deep beneath the earth.
Congealing.
It's congealed.
Yeah.
There comes a point where a rat walks by, I think, and then the blood grabs the rat.
Grabs the rat, and then another rat, and then bit by bit it crawls out of the morass and crawls back up to the top of the world, and Sauron is back bit by bit until eventually he gets to that little carriage, and
with a woman.
It stops in
the carriage.
It's similar to some episodes from Doctor Who, where some of the big baddies, extraterrestrial baddies, they become more stronger by basically eating and consuming helpless human people, and it's that which basically you see in this first episode, which I thought was cool. And then bit by bit, he reanimates himself and he becomes, the Sauron, the new Sauron, version 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever it is up to this point.
The version that we see from season 1,
yes.
Halbrand.
And I'm having a flashback whilst I'm saying this of the Mummy Returns movies, where we had a similar thing where, through spells and whatnot, the mummy is brought back, and then bit by bit, the people who basically, the bounty hunters and whatnot, he basically takes all their organs from them, and he becomes, the resurrected
Interesting. Yeah.
pharaoh, or the magician to the pharaoh, But it was lots of vibes about that, and vibes about Doctor Who and aliens absorbing humans and whatnot. Yeah. So
now, from what I read on the internet and saw in some videos on here on YouTube, a lot of people were not thrilled with this little storyline of Sauron getting killed, his blood congealing into this creature, and then him turning into Halbrand, because I guess to them it just didn't make sense.
Read the books.
Is it in there in the books?
No, not explicitly, but you get, like I said, when one writes fantasy, it's pushing the reader to use their imagination. For example, I don't want to go talk about the First Age all the time, but there is quite a bit of detail where Sauron, who was then a lieutenant of Morgoth, is deliberately capturing people, taking them back to the werewolf's island and doing various types of torture to them. And then he may be killed in one version, but he comes back as another type of beast and another creature. And so, he had that ability. And this is just another exploration of that after the events that take place at the beginning of episode 1. So I thought it was pretty cool personally, but then again, I've read the first book and the second book and the third book and the fourth book and all the Lost Tales books. So
there's a lot of lore there.
Indeed, yes.
But okay, cool. And then the show kind of, in this prologue to season 2, if you will, it catches us up to where Halbrand meets Galadriel for the first time in the Sundering Seas.
Yep.
And then the story kind of takes off regarding the rings themselves, the Elven rings of power.
Mm-hmm.
I find it almost amusing because from the very get-go, Elrond just wants to destroy the rings.
Yep.
And it makes me think of his portrayal, his depiction in Peter Jackson's trilogy, where he was played by Hugo Weaving, where all he wants to do in that trilogy is destroy the rings. So Elrond just wants to destroy rings.
Yes,
that's
he has a thing about him, because
he has a thing about
maybe he's got a personal stake in the matter, because he's was he several thousand years old by the time of the events in the Lord of the Rings movies. So, and then he was there when they besieged Mordor, and that was a long siege, by the way, and lots of elves and humans and others got killed as a consequence. So, and then at the end of that climatic siege and the massive battle, he knew it could have been ended there and then, but Isildur had other ideas. Yes.
The Battle of Daggerlad.
Indeed,
right?
Yes.
Yes. I was just going to ask, and that's from the prologue of the Fellowship of the Ring.
Yep.
Okay. So, Andrew, what are your thoughts on this portion of the show where Galadriel and Gil-galad seem kind of gung-ho on using the Elven rings, whereas
it's strange. I'll be honest with you. I was kind of puzzled, but it's reminded me of the elves are still relatively young, even though they're several thousand years old. They're still young in that they're still finding their way. They still haven't been reminded that the human element is just going to get stronger and stronger and stronger, and they haven't had to endure something similar to what they did endure in the First Age, massive, overwhelming defeats. And here they are. They believed after the events of the First Age that they got the world to themselves, Middle-earth to themselves. And there's just these puny folks to the east, which they got to keep an eye on. But for the most part, they can run around and do what they do, have their vegan, meals or whatever, or whatever they eat, and do the various things which I supposedly have been doing for quite some time. But then they see this new threat appear, and they're kind of like, okay, we got to deal with it right away, So it was kind of interesting to me to see that dynamic going on.
So would you say that the elves we see in the Rings of Power are a more inexperienced, immature version of what we see in Peter Jackson's trilogy?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Which, once again, if you're familiar with the lore, can be baffling, because if you read about the events that took place in the First Age, please, can I stop talking about the First Age? But if we do, then you realize they went through hell and more in the First Age, and you think they would have gained some wisdom, those that decided to stay in Middle-earth, but obviously not so much. So, which is kind of interesting. Yeah.
So in the story,
Yeah.
Elrond takes the rings, jumps off the cliff, goes down the waterfall, because he is determined to not allow the king, Gil-galad, to use the rings, because we, as the audience, know, I think, that Sauron did not touch the elven rings. He was part of their creation, but he did not put any of his essence into the rings. But Elrond doesn't know that.
Yeah.
Because out of all the rings that were made, all of the rings of power, the rings for elves, rings for dwarves, rings for men, and the One Ring, the elven rings were the only ones, which is lore accurate, that Sauron did not have a hand in making.
Yeah.
So they're safe.
But you got to ask the question too, Colin. Was it what was the incentive? What was what really motivated the elves, the three higher elves, whatever you want to call them, to create these things in the first place? What were they afraid of? And, if you look at the Rings of Power season 2, they're making reference to they had that tree of life, or whatever you want to call it, that
I just call it the Great Elven Tree.
Yeah, that
Lindon.
was showing. It reminded me of Terry Brooks and his magic tree. Remember?
Yeah.
The Shannara thing. But anyway, that aside, you had the impression that because the elves are very much in tune with nature and very much in tune with sacred great trees, that they believed that unless they did something soon, and that their ability to coexist and to be in control of their destiny would be much, much, much reduced as a consequence of this tree passing away. And so they decided, okay, we're going to use these magic devices and the rings to enhance our ability to control nature, which raises a philosophical question, by the way. Like, who do these beings think they are? But at the same time, you could ask yourself, okay, if they're creating these rings, what was the motivation? Why did they think that they had to do this? And as I just stated, my hypothesis is that they realized that they couldn't control things anymore like they had been used to ever since the fall of Morgoth. And their solution was, we create these magical devices, and thus we will be able to control our own destiny.
Fascinating.
Indeed. Yeah.
Does the show, and this goes back to season 1, because I can't remember, maybe you can. Does the show at any point tell us why the Great Tree of Lindon is dying?
No. I mean, you just have to, it's like with the the Third Age with the White Tree, in
Gondor.
In Gondor, and then you have the little flashback in season 1 of the Rings of Power to the other Great Tree, the White Tree that's in.
Oh, Númenor.
Númenor, yeah, which it's talking in many instances. It was like, I've got no inspiration from Atlantis. Where was it? It's Atlantis, right? Anyway, and they're basing their whole way in which they look at the world and the how politicians operate, how kings and queens come and go, and the stability of the realm based upon the health of this tree. Once that tree is out of whack, once that tree is dying, then something seriously is happening with their civilization. Similarly, I think with the elves, with that particular tree in Lindon, they just viewed it as, this is it. If that dies, we die. Hence the motivation for the rings, which is kind of interesting, to me.
No, I definitely agree.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how they brought, Mithril into this whole equation.
Yes, that was curious too. Yeah.
And I will admit, because I watched season 1 so many times in preparation for, my videos here on Saga Sessions, I will agree with most of the internet that the inclusion of Mithril in the whole rings equation, lore, whatever you call it, is strange and in some ways feels a little unnecessary.
Well, that, and also remember, once again, the events of the First Age.
The First
Age. A new series, which we will talk about at a later date. But anyway, in the events of the First Age, there was a huge, great big rift between the realms of the dwarves and the realms of the elves. Even though they were supposedly fighting against the same common enemy, Morgoth, they decided to have this huge conflict because of jewels.
The Silmarils?
No. Well, some of them were encompassed into these specific jewels that were then found themselves into the one last remaining elf kingdom the dwarves heard about it, they came there with an army and they wanted it back. And,
Okay.
all hell broke loose. Yeah. So
Interesting.
indeed.
So there's history there.
Yes, the dwarves and the elves were not big fans of each other's at the end of the First Age.
Right.
They had shed a lot of blood, killing each other. So it was interesting that suddenly in the Second Age, all that's forgotten. That, although interesting, you go to Peter Jackson and you can clearly see embers of that conflict is still there, when, the interactions with Gimli, when he gets into the Lorien and he's mentioning, smelly, whatever, elves,
That's right.
you can't trust them, you can't, and all the rest of it. And yet in the Second Age, we want to forget that. It's as if an entire epoch has decided, we're just at peace with each other now. I mean, it's, once again, I'm being, how can I say, nitpicky, but it is an element that you have to willfully ignore in looking at the Rings of Power, second series.
Understood.
Yeah.
So, moving along in the story, we meet a character that I was actually very excited to see for the first time, and that is the bearded elf, Círdan, the shipwright.
Indeed, that was cool, yeah.
That was really cool.
And to see him basically he's very much an old man by the end of the First Age, and then you see him in the Second Age, he's still doing his thing.
Right. Doesn't Tolkien himself at some point say that he is the oldest elf?
Indeed. Yes, he is, yeah.
Which is why he has a beard?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The wisest, too.
The oldest and the wisest.
Yeah.
I remember, and this just shows how I fancy myself a student of Tolkien lore, but I don't know everything.
Mm-hmm. Me either.
When they first revealed the look of Círdan ahead of the premiere of The Rings of Power Season 2, I saw the photo and I said, what the heck are they doing giving us a bearded elf? Amazon has gone too far. They are out of control. And then I forget who it was. It might have been my brother or my dad. I forget. But they were like, actually, Colin, in Tolkien lore, he actually has a beard. And I was like, oh, okay. But it was really cool to see him in the show.
Yeah.
Have that character introduced. And for those of you who have not read the book, The Lord of the Rings, and you've only seen Peter Jackson's trilogy, he is in the book. He appears at the end, right?
He's there at the same place he is in the Second and the First Age. Yeah, he's still doing his thing, which is kind of incredible, really. Yeah, the Havens. Yeah. It's as if that was his destiny, So, but then again, I think it's like, I guess it was Tolkien's way, perhaps, of he's the keeper of the pathway to heaven, to the afterlife.
Interesting.
Indeed.
Yeah,
Havens,
that's a really interesting way to look at it.
The keeper, the shrouded keeper down there, on the river Styx. Like,
where's your
penny? Where's your penny? Put your penny in my mouth, then you can go across.
Who is that guy's, or what is that guy's name in Greek mythology? Chiron.
Yes,
or,
Chiron,
Charon, pardon me.
Yeah.
Charon.
So what was it? So was Círdan, is he like, his version of that particular aspect?
Maybe.
Because remember, Tolkien was massively into, what the legends of the Greeks, the legends of the Romans, the legends of the Norse, the legends of the English, and so on and so on.
Right.
So obviously he knew about these things, and I guess he's trying to drip, a little here, a little there, a little change the name here, change to that there, and just throw it in, and let you, the reader, figure it out, So that's just my take on it.
No.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
So in the story, Elrond goes to Círdan for help, and we think Círdan's going to help Elrond because Galadriel and King Gil-galad are chasing Elrond to get the rings back.
Mm-hmm.
And he says to Círdan, "Here, take these. Get rid of them. Make sure we can't find them." And Círdan tells him, "Oh, there is a place I can take these deep in the waters where." He mentions something involving the lore of the land, but I can take these somewhere deep in the waters where they'll never be found. But we see Círdan actually become, not corrupted, but become enamored with the rings himself, and he chooses to keep them.
Yeah, which is fascinating to me.
Yeah, definitely.
It's as if he saw something that the elves didn't want to see themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So ultimately, the elves gather together surrounding Gil-galad. Círdan shows up, gives a ring to Galadriel, gives a ring to Gil-galad, and keeps a ring for himself.
Mm-hmm.
And Elrond is just so disappointed. But that's okay because, as we mentioned earlier, the rings were not touched by Sauron, and they are safe to use. And the great tree of Lindon is, for the moment,
replenished.
Healed. Yep.
Yeah. It survives.
Golden leaves.
Yeah.
The bright light shines forth.
Terry Brooks was inspired, I'm sure. Yeah.
Probably. But let's talk about the storyline that actually interested me the most before the season came out, and that was Gandalf, the Stranger. This is also, just right off the bat, the most disappointing storyline in the whole season for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's as if, I had a conversation with your sister about this, which was fascinating, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, Kieran, yeah. And they were trying to, replicate what they did in the original trilogy, where you had like multiple storylines simultaneously happening, and you, the reader, and then you, the viewer, were supposed to be able to put yourself in, what's going on in the chase with Saruman, and what's going on with Legolas, and what's going on with, Samwise Gamgee and Frodo, and so on and so forth. And they've tried to recreate that in the season 2. And I think Kieran and I both agreed it wasn't working, because I didn't feel like the same amount of resonance with the story of the young Gandalf with his two Hobbit sidekicks. And they're not Samwise Gamgee. They're definitely not Frodo. And I was like, what is this? And then introducing us to a little community of hobbits living in the Easterland somewhere.
The Stoors.
Yeah, and I was like,
Stoors? And
yeah.
My family is probably sick and tired of hearing me complain about this, but Stoors are supposed to be river folk.
Indeed, yes.
Gollum, Smeagol, was a Stoor, and he and Deagle.
And what a naughty guy he turned out to be, right?
Right, yeah.
So.
Right. But, I don't know what they were doing with this storyline. And it's...
Yeah, I think it was a wasted opportunity. I think they could have done better, but they decided to go this way instead of that way. But yeah, whatever. I mean, I think overall, does it detract from perhaps the season? Yeah, to a degree. If you still like the season, which I thought was still enjoyable regardless, then yeah, you're still going to keep watching. You want to find out what happens in the next season, because there's a lot of potential. We've yet to, peel away the layers and find out, for example, what happened to the other blue wizard? Where is he? I know he's there somewhere.
Right.
And what's going to go on with Tom Bombadil? I don't think he's done yet, and so on and so forth. Yeah, and so yeah, it was interesting. And if you like the story, regardless of how they, the little plot line with Gandalf and his two Hobbit sidekicks, then you're still going to keep watching.
Well, I did promise a bit more of a balanced approach to season 2, but I have to get this off my chest just real quick.
Fire away.
Aside from the Stoors, my biggest issue with the Gandalf storyline is that the whole thing begins with a retcon. In the end of season 1, Poppy says farewell to the Stranger, a.k.a. Gandalf, and Nori. It's a beautiful farewell scene. They hug, they cry, and it's like, okay, she's gone, she's done. And yet they bring her back immediately in the beginning of the Gandalf storyline in season 2.
Right.
So it's like, okay, obviously in the writer's room, they realized, maybe Nori is not interesting enough by herself, and we need to bring Poppy back.
Yeah.
I just don't like when they do stuff like that.
Yeah, why bring in the love interest too? For Poppy.
The store fellow.
Yeah, well, what was that about? I mean, why? But whatever. I mean, regardless.
What was his name? Nobody or something?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it just. And when I think of Nobody, I'm thinking of that. I won't say cheesy, but good knockoff of John Wick that recently came out. The movie, but I think there's a spaghetti western, the same thing. Came out in the late 60s, also highly, Nick recommended. But regardless, it was...
Nick from Indiana Jones.
Indeed. Hi, Nick. Yeah, it was unnecessary, and I just don't think they should have gone that particular avenue. But regardless, overall, am I going to watch season 3? Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, yeah, same here.
Yeah.
And so, to be more positive, I like that we were introduced to Tom Bombadil for the first time.
Yes, that was... For me, one of the highlights. And why? Well, we got to see a character who, Peter Jackson, for this or that reason, decided to delete, which was unnecessary in my view, but whatever. Colin and I have talked about this in the past. But here you are in season 2, he's introduced. He's now this even more mysterious character that seems to be the the person who hands over the mantle of power to these young up and coming wizards and teaches them how to be a wizard in some ways. And so, like, go find the rod, go find your path. It's like a Yoda in some respects, of the Jedi Academy. Here we are, Tom Bombadil. He's got the new wannabe magicians comes to him and, okay, tell me how to be a magician. Well, you got to listen to what's going on up there and also these sticks over there. And it was great in my view. And then you got to see some little echoes of his interaction with the real world, his knowledge of the First Age, which was great. And then his conversation, once again, explicitly stated, I think it was episode 2 or 3, where you saw him interacting with his significant other.
Episode 4.
Yes.
Yeah.
In what was later to become part of the outer part of the Shire. So yeah, I thought it was cool. I like that.
So here's a question for you, since we're talking about Tom Bombadil. In the book, The Fellowship of the Ring, we meet Tom Bombadil and his wife Goldberry.
Yep.
But in this show, Goldberry is a voice that we hear in the background.
Yep.
But Tom Bombadil acts like she's not actually there.
So why? Yeah, go on. Go ahead.
My question is, what are the showrunners trying to tell us about Goldberry? Because Gandalf is in the bathtub cleaning up. Actually, that's just a funny sentence in and of itself. Gandalf is in the bathtub, but he's cleaning up. He hears Tom and a female voice interacting and singing in the background. And when Tom walks in, Gandalf says, "Oh, who was that with you?" And Tom just is like, "What are you talking about? There's no one here. You're here." But
yeah,
and
you think she's two possibilities: the leader of the Entwives, or
fan theory.
One of the hitherto unknown part of the Maya complex. The wizards and the spirits amongst them: Saruman, Gandalf, Sauron. She's one of that, and perhaps she's, Tom didn't want Gandalf to know that perhaps he would figure out who she is, because remember, before he became Gandalf, he was a Maya, still is a Maya.
Right.
Yeah. But, who knows? And I think having that mysterious aspect to it makes you want to see season 3. Maybe there's some more allusions to it. I don't know. But
I'm sure in time they will reveal her.
Yeah.
I just thought it was an interesting choice.
Indeed.
Yeah.
But I like mystery.
Oh yeah, definitely.
You have to put your thinking cap on and figure things out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Start some fan theories.
Mm-hmm.
I love the actor they chose for young Gandalf.
Oh yeah.
I think he has a warmth about him, a strong presence. His voice is comforting.
Yeah.
Very much like Ian McKellen's voice.
Mm-hmm.
So even though they kind of turned the Gandalf storyline into my least favorite storyline in season 2, he is actually one of my favorite characters. Nori, on the other hand, used to be one of my favorite characters from season 1, but she just became flat, uninteresting, and I see why they had to bring Poppy in, because they realized that Poppy was the more interesting of the two. And
why have two Hobbit sidekicks?
Maybe they wanted to mirror Frodo and Sam.
Yeah, but
I don't know.
Yeah, it's we've been there, we've done that, we got the T-shirt. There's a whole bunch of other things we could have done. But yeah, it's getting back to the writing room and what they decided to do and what they could have done. But yeah, it is what it is, and I guess the Hobbits will be making a bigger appearance perhaps towards the end of the season. I'd say season 3, season 4, or whatever, however long this thing is gonna.
Maybe it's gonna. Oh, unless they cancel it, they have a plan for 5 seasons.
There you go. So,
yeah, and supposedly season 5, the finale, will end with the Battle of Daggerlad.
There you go.
Where Isildur takes the ring for himself.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect segue.
Indeed.
The storyline of Isildur in season 2.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is weak.
It is. Yeah. And I don't know why they decided to do what they did. Perhaps they have something in mind for season 3, but what's your impressions of him? I mean, do you think it's like, he's going to save the Númenorians when the Great Flood comes? He's going to be the salvation of Middle-earth, To the contrary, you got this individual who's very compromised and, He doesn't seem to have a good grasp of what it takes to be, anything like his father. But here we are. I guess they're trying to take what embers we did see in the prologue in the Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring, and they're trying to expand on that.
They gave him a love interest in season 2, Estrid, only to rip her away at the very end, and presumably she's gone for the rest of the series.
No, she's not. She'll be back.
You think she'll be back?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
You don't build up a character like that, and this is not Game of Thrones. Yeah, where you would have these wonderful characters introducing them, whap, off with the head, they die off.
Right.
Yeah, no, a Tolkien. It's not like that. But again, we're looking at two individuals now who've taken the world of Tolkien. They've created this dynamic. They've created this love triangle, if you will. They will be an expansion of that or elaboration of that, I think, in season 3. Definitely in season 4. Yeah, absolutely.
As disappointing as Isildur's storyline was in season 2, I am very interested to see what lies ahead for him in the rest of the series because, and I may have spoken about this in my season 1 review. I can't remember right now, but the showrunners, J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay.
Well done, Colin.
Oh, thank you. I've done some homework.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They've spoken about how they wanted to give Isildur a story arc, a character arc, if you will, very similar to Michael Corleone from the Godfather trilogy.
Yeah.
He starts out as this innocent character who kind of wants a little bit more from the world. He's curious. He rises up to some power, becomes a man of influence, and ultimately falls into...
he gets corrupted.
Yes, thank you. And ultimately, if you've seen the original trilogy of The Lord of the Rings, Isildur is a minor character with a huge part to play.
Yeah.
So...
Tolkien's parable there. Power corrupts, absolute power, absolutely.
That's right. Yeah. So I may not have explained that very well, but that is what they have in mind for Isildur overall over the course of these 5 seasons that they intend to produce. So I'm curious to see how they play this out. I think Elendil is a much more
he is. He's
interesting character.
He's a tragic hero type character too, which I hope they explore a bit more. His relationship to the Queen, who will ultimately get killed, I believe. But
Queen Muriel?
Yeah. And then I think it's going to be fascinating to see the destruction of Númenor, how that happens, and how the survivors escape.
What season do you think the destruction of Númenor is?
I'm guessing it's going to be season 3, definitely season 3.
Okay.
Personally.
Okay.
Season 4 will just be war, more war, with a little bit of laughter or some singing hobbits here and there, but it will be war. And then season 5 will be, how most of the kings and all the heroes all got killed, But I think season 3 has to be season 3. Remember, that's Tolkien's little take on Atlantis.
That's right. Yeah. Númenor.
Yep.
But yeah, Elendil, I find, even from season 1, I thought he was one of the stronger characters. And that carries over, I think, into season 2. He's very much the Aragorn of this show, which is funny because he's Aragorn's ancestor, as is Isildur. I believe the actor's name is Lloyd Owen.
Welsh.
I think he's
Welsh, just like me. Yeah.
He's Welsh?
It sounds like it, yeah. I think he is Welsh, yes. I was looking at the little outtakes and stuff, and he's talking in his native accent. Yeah, he is. I think he's a Welsh.
Very nice.
He's a Welshie, yeah.
As much as I enjoy his character, I'm still not a huge fan of the Númenor storylines.
Yeah, I mean... once again, I'm like a little bit baffled, but then at the same time, Tolkien did allude to there was internal dissent within the kingdom before the arrival of Sauron. It was no happy, let's dance around the white tree and have a great time. It's a wonderful kingdom. Yeah, we love the elves. Yeah. And then after that, there was definitely some tension going on. With the expansion, they've conquered all these markets, and they keep on being told, you cannot, under any circumstance, ever, ever, ever go west. And so as a natural, it's a natural thing. Whenever you're told you can't go somewhere, you want to go there. And I think over time, it was only natural that they would get a little bit PO'd, because they're told constantly how much help the elves defeat the great big baddie in the First Age. Let's talk about that another time. And they're constantly being told about how great they are, and they're descendants of these heroes, and they've been exploring the world and having these little settlements here, there, and everywhere. And yet they can't go the one place where their heart and mind tells them they want to go and they need to go. And so when finally you have this character of Sauron appears, and he starts to manipulate that, which is that was his primary function, apart from being a werewolf and a vampire and God knows what else. He also had this great talent for manipulating people and having them
the deceiver.
The deceiver, yes. And once again, another talking analogy there, if you want to look at it, in terms
sure,
of,
yeah.
But his talent was for manipulating folks and getting them to do things they don't really want to do, but they do anyway. And I think, yes, that tale is being explored in season 2. It was alluded to in season 1. I think it will reach its culmination in season 3, where the whole kingdom gets wiped out, and then we know the rest. So, Ar-Pharazôn, who is the Númenorian big baddie,
interesting character.
Yeah,
honestly, I got called out by some people on YouTube in my season 1 review because I didn't know that Ar-Pharazôn was actually a character from Tolkien lore.
Mm-hmm. He was.
I
indeed,
thought he was an original character to the Rings of Power.
Oh no.
So
was that in the appendices? They have the original published Lord of the Rings at the end. So
I'm
I
sure
read
he's
more of
mentioned
it,
in there.
an Unfinished Tales, and then Book of Lost Tales 5 or something like that. But it was, for me, as with most things, season 2, Rings of Power, fascinating, and I loved it. So yeah, to see that dynamic now brought to life in a visual format, go for it.
So let me ask you this then. Obviously, we've alluded to the fact that there's a power struggle going on in Númenor, and Ar-Pharazôn takes over the kingdom and shoves Queen Regent Muriel aside. So do the Númenorians believe that a great eagle chooses their leader? Is that what they allude to in this season?
That is in a cloud of ambiguity, because we do know the eagles played a part in the First Age, and we do know the eagles are very much part of Middle-earth, and we do know that the Edain and the House of Haleth, etc., Tolkien freaks, please, you know what I'm talking about. They do revere the great eagles, okay? And whether or not the great eagles were there in terms of choosing who or who is not a righteous to be the next leader, I think is a little bit ambiguity there. I'm not 100% sure. I wouldn't be surprised if it is true. But I think the fact that it is there and it's explicitly stated in, I think it was the episode where you were just stuck on Reunion Mode. Yeah, I think, it could have been a factor, yes.
That was episode 3, The Eagle and the Scepter.
Yeah.
Yep.
Could have. And what do the eagles represent in the Tolkien universe? What do they represent? The all-seeing eye, power, the fight against the dragons, the folks who always help out, Gandalf and friends when they're on their various, in The Hobbit, and then again in, the adventures in Lord of the Rings. They were there to help them out. When all hope is lost, eagles appear. Battle of Five Armies, all hope is lost, eagles appear.
It almost seems like Tolkien, who, by the way, was a very devout Catholic.
He was.
It almost seems like the eagles mirror angels in a way, perhaps.
In some ways. But, if you look at the symbolism of an eagle, I don't want to go off on a tangent too much, but you contrast that, the symbol of the snake. What was the snake a symbol of? And then what was the eagle a symbol? The eagle in our parlance, in our world, not the Middle-earth world, an eagle is a symbol of imperial might.
Right.
The all-seeing eye looking down at you from above.
Right.
He likes to feed on snakes, by the way, and things wiggling on the ground. And so that's the symbolism of that. In the Tolkien universe, it's more of a symbolism when all hope is lost, the eagles come to the rescue. Okay, they're the good guys from up above, all powerful. Now, look at the symbolism of the snake in our world. What's the symbolism of the snake? The snake is
the devil.
The devil, but also, the Garden of Eden, of course, the whispering, the knowledge. But and then you look at the ancient Celts. What was their symbol? There's the snake.
Really? I didn't know that.
The wisdom of the snake.
Interesting.
Look at the American, medical association, you look at any of their journals, it's a pole, the staff of knowledge wrapped around with a snake.
Oh, yeah.
It's the forbidden knowledge you must not know about because the snake told you it. So when you look at it that way, perhaps that symbolism is more meaningful if you start looking at it that way. Then and then you have to question the nature of reality too in our world. But we're not talking about our world; we're talking about Middle Earth world now. So in Middle Earth world, it's the eagles are the symbol of hope, the symbol of when everything's lost, the eagles come to the rescue. And so, obviously that's, I think in that episode, it for the Númenorians, they see this, yes, all this doubt, all this ambiguity smashed away. That eagle's arrived, he's telling us who the king is going to be.
Why do you think the eagle chose Pharazôn?
I guess he must have thought he was the right one at that time, to lead him in the right way. Unless he's one of these naughty eagles who are, they're up to they have their own agenda, but I don't know. It is something fascinating to think about, and you just have to remember. I guess there was like different parts. Remember, Númenor, even though they're great big bloody beasts and they can fly, I'm assuming across oceans with little to no effort, there was a nest of eagles on Númenor, and I guess they were the sacred eagles. Yeah, but there's also quite a few nests in Middle Earth, as you know. So yeah, it was at the ones in Middle Earth. Were they of a different tribe than the ones over in Númenor? I guess they knew about each other, but maybe they have different motives and things they're looking over. Because they're up there, they're flying around and eating the occasional cow and whatnot, and they're seeing what's going on down there, and they say, "Oh, there seems to be a little bit of problem with these human guys who are supposed to be looking at, and it's this faction against that faction, and." Who should we back, boys? Well, maybe the guy who seems to have a lot of financial and economic power. Let's back him, Ar-Pharazôn.
Maybe the stronger choice.
Yeah, either that or they were fed a nice big tasty bit of some cows and veals and
sure.
say, you go you go
bribery.
Indeed, but I don't know, that's all speculation. But yeah, he played an interesting part in making that episode, the way it developed. Yeah, and we do know from the appendices and from the lore that Tolkien did relate to us that the Númenorians did go down a certain path, which Ar-Pharazôn led them down to, and ultimately it was the wrong path. Yeah,
interesting. So
the eagle was responsible. You naughty eagle.
That's right.
There was eagles and eagles.
When everything goes to pot in season 3, assuming it's season 3, we'll just blame the eagle.
Yes, blame that silly eagle. Yes.
So while we're on the topic of Númenor, what's going on with this movement of the faithful and Ar-Pharazôn sending his son Kemen to go and crack down on the faithful and their practices?
Out with the old, in with the new. I guess it's that. Remember, I just mentioned about for generations now the Númenorians had venerated the elves and venerated their ancestors, what they'd done in the first age, and they had thus created a mythos, right? But they're at the stage, remember, Colin, that after several generations now, we're exploring Middle Earth. They're seeing it's a great big bloody world out there. There's lots of potential, and they keep on being told, even though they're mariners and the folks who are making money off Middle Earth, they're being told you can never go west. That's off limits. They're like, why?
Right.
Why?
In fact, I recall in season 1 when Isildur is serving on one of the ships, he hears a voice calling his name from the lands to the is it the west or the east?
Well, it's the west is where all the the high elves and various folks who had been given, if you will, special pardons were all hanging out, in the lands beyond the seas where you're not supposed to go to unless you're really, 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 really extremely special.
Sure.
And so the Númenorians didn't fit into that category. But that's where all I guess from the Númenorian perspective, that's where all the goodies were. And they wanted to find out about the goodies.
Right.
Not the British comedians, by the way, but, the wealth and the potential. They wanted to know what was there and why they were being told they can't go there, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Kemen, who is the son of Pharazôn, to me is just one of the most annoying characters in the
whole
show.
But I think he serves a purpose, Colin. He's there as like a counterbalance, if you will, to demonstrate Okay, there's the goodies and there's the baddies. And I'm definitely baddie, and I like being bad. And I think it's he's there to be a symbol of, okay, this is what, power can do. It can corrupt people. And when you start making these types of decisions where you blanketly list people as undesirables or not part of the future or the present, then have a guess what? This is what happens. Yeah.
I was very surprised in the I forget which episode it was. It might have been the 4th episode, Eldest, or it could have been the 3rd episode. I think it was the 4th. Anyways, I was very surprised when they made the creative decision for Kemen to kill Elendil, Isildur's buddy.
Right. I mean, once again, it's in terms of creating the conflict. It was a great, how can I say, visualization of what is about to take place on Númenor as a whole. They're not afraid to go down that extra, level now to achieve their aims and goals, which is ultimately power and control of the total, the Númenorian Empire, which, remember, at that time was expanding,
right?
But not to the west where they really wanted to be.
What are we to make of Elendil's daughter, who, by the way, is completely made up for the show, The Rings of Power?
Strange. And I don't know. Why did the writers decide to go down that path? Maybe it's like someone who, to use a biblical term, she's tasted some of the apple and she wanted a little bit of power, and now she's having some regrets.
Maybe. Yeah. I can't even remember her name, unfortunately. My apologies, everyone. But I find her to be almost an unnecessary character. I think they just wanted to give Elendil a daughter. And is it Eärien? Maybe that's her name.
Could be.
Because she was interesting in season 1, and they ended her storyline in season 1 with her finding the Palantir. And I thought, oh, this is actually very interesting. She's going to become corrupted by the Palantir. But that turned out to not be the case. She was corrupted by power, but not the Palantir. She ends up using the Palantir against Queen Muriel.
And where have we seen that before, Colin? Remember, in the after the battle with Rohan, and a certain hobbit picks up the Palantir.
When Pippin gets the Palantir, yes.
He's more curious for his own good,
right. Yeah, some parallels there for sure.
Indeed, yeah. Once again, that conversation with your sister, Kieran.
Right.
They're channeling the events of what happens in the movies and the books, and they say, "Okay, here's a little bit of this, and there's a little bit of that, and a little bit of this."
Right.
So it's like, okay, I remember this. Oh, okay, I remember that. Yeah. So they're keeping you interested.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you make of the whole trial that they put Muriel through with the sea beast,
the sea monster? That's just weird. The whole
it was very strange.
It just reminded me of a whole bunch of kaiju stuff from Japan, Japanese contemporary monster movies. I'm not talking about Godzilla, but there's been so many others, and in the TV series too, the Kamen Rider and the Ultraman. And there's always these allusions to monsters of the deep and monsters of the swamp and monsters of the mountain and monster this and monster that. It reminded me of that, where this particular one supposedly was the guardian of Númenor, and in order for her to pass the test, to whether she's innocent or guilty, she had to be dropped into this monster's lap, and it's like, okay, what do you think? And I just thought it was kind of unnecessary. But then there's been a lot of unnecessary aspects to season 2. But at the same time, it added an element of, for those of us now who've been groomed in the age of kaiju, I hope you have too, Colin, then you'll find that interesting because, we're going to see a new monster. We're going to see a monster in Middle-earth, and not the one that was in the Fellowship of the Ring. There's like the Guardian who was there.
Oh, the Watcher in the water.
This is a new type of beast, and it was a monster beast that was underneath the water, and I thought that was interesting how it looked at her, and it said, "No, missus, you got to go back up again."
Right.
I'm not going to gobble you up today, so off you go. And I thought that was interesting in that, didn't Gandalf say, there's stranger things in, beneath the mountains than, and darker things than orcs.
There are older and fouler things than orcs.
And here we are, we're introduced to yet another one. which is fascinating. And I assume this one was there way before the elves and way before the men and dwarves came on the scene. For those of us who are familiar with Tolkien and then familiar with kaiju, I just thought it was a great little element to include. Yes, it was kind of silly, but I don't mind silliness, So
sure, as long as it's interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Did you get a little channel of like Game of Thrones again? With the, where they have the that little story arc where there's the people of the Isles and they have their own customs and beliefs and
the Iron Islands.
The Iron Islands, yeah, and their special way of like introducing you to their gods. They got to submerge you and all the rest of it.
That's right. You have to drown.
Yes, particularly.
Right,
yeah.
and then rise up again stronger.
Exactly, and so it was channeling that to a certain degree, and here we are. And I just thought, I think it worked. Even though it was silly, it worked for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, okay. It was. I mean, I've been wanting to ask somebody about that for a while now because. I've watched season 2 like 3 times now in preparation for this discussion.
Good for you, Colin.
Yeah, I've done my homework.
You clearly have.
I don't remember everything perfectly, but I'm doing my best to like remember like the important elements of the story. And that scene, I never quite knew what to make of it with the sea monster and Muriel underwater. And
I love sea monsters, so I thought it was kind of cool.
I do want to jump into the Sauron and Celebrimbor storyline, but before we do that, because I want to save the best for last.
Go ahead.
Let's talk about the dwarves.
Yeah, interesting. Very, very interesting. I mean, I think that for me, one of the strongest aspects of the show, both season 1 and season 2, is the dwarf story arcs. We got the tension between, I guess the father-son dynamic going on.
Durin Senior, and
then the role of the I wouldn't call her a wallflower, of the Durin Junior, his wife,
Disa.
And how her influence is largely dictating his actions. That is kind of interesting, but nevertheless, I think the portrayal of Moria, right, Khazad-dûm, is, for me, one of the best aspects of both season 1 and season 2. And yet the dwarves' complete abject knowledge of what lies beneath is even more fascinating. Here they are, the great big architects of the inner world, if you will, and creating cities out of rock inside a mountain, and yet they don't know. Lurking right below them is one of the greatest foes of the dwarves, and anybody else for that matter. Just lurking there, waiting to be
a demon of the ancient world.
Indeed, waiting for an opening to come back. So I think, I loved it to see the dwarves being portrayed the way they were, and to see Khazad-dûm, Moria, the way it was portrayed before the destruction that took place. The portrayal of the kingdom, but the portrayal of the family dynamics, the politics. Yeah, great. And to see them. What did Amazon introduce, or the writers introduce? The singing dwarven ladies, and
I forget what they're called, but they sing to the mountain in hopes that the mountain will reply to them, will give something back.
Yes, I thought that was great.
Yeah, it was a really cool concept.
Yeah, I loved it. Yeah.
Do you find it believable that the eruption of Orodruin, Mount Doom, all the way in the Southlands, which is now Mordor, would cause the light shafts in Khazad-dûm to collapse?
Maybe. When you consider, these analogous to our world, Colin, you think about the Ring of Fire. I'm not talking about the Johnny Cash song. I'm talking about, the Ring of Fire. It goes through basically the south from the Americas, up through Alaska, down. It's like a ring circling, the Pacific Ocean. Okay. And all of it is interconnected, and all of it is basically volcanic. Like when one thing goes off, it has an immediate impact on another one, and another one, and another one. And similarly, perhaps in the geology of Middle Earth, you have that similar, if one thing is going off, Mount Doom, then it's going to have an impact on the other mountains, around, because they're not that far away if you look at a map, Middle Earth. And
that's true. Yeah. That's true.
It does not, it would not be a huge surprise to find out that this massive eruption that took place in Mordor, did they call it Mordor at that time? I mean,
it was the Southlands.
The Southlands, yeah, would have an impact on this big city beneath a mountain that perhaps was connected to what was going on, it would have an impact of some sort. And it did, so yeah.
True.
Yeah.
So while we're talking about the dwarves, we are introduced to the dwarf rings, which are the first batch of rings containing the influence of Sauron.
That was cool, in my view.
We only get to see one in action, and that is the ring of Durin Sr., Durin the Third.
Yeah. And then seeing all the rest of the, I'm sorry.
You're good.
Seeing all the rest of the dwarven kings like submitting, hey Durin, you're the high king of high kings. Yeah. We submit to you and we will give you tribute and all the rest of it. And then to see the avarice and the malice once they discover that, things are not what they seem to be. Yeah, that was cool. I liked it. I thought it was a great element, the way it was depicted, personally.
What did you think of the ring's ability to
enhance his ability to, it enhanced the innate abilities of dwarfs, to find out, for example, they're always searching for gold and new streams of this, new streams of that.
Right.
It enhanced his ability, and it also enhanced his ability to figure out problems and look for solutions, under the mountains and so off. Yeah, I think that's very believable.
Because King Durin talks about the fact that with the ring, he's able to see the mountain.
Yes. So I think, and similarly, when Sauron was creating these things, the rings, he was looking at the dwarven race, and he was looking at the human race, and he was looking at the various properties and abilities associated with each, and he said, okay, what do the dwarves crave above all else? What do the humans?
Riches.
Indeed. And what do the humans crave above all else?
Power.
Yes. And so, is it any wonder that is what corrupted them? I mean, and whereas you contrast that to the elves, and I know supposedly he didn't play that much of a part in creating those 3 rings, but ask yourself, what distinguishes the elves from those other 2, from the dwarves and the humans?
Right.
Well, what did the elves, above all else, crave, lust for, if that is the right word, or that they strive for, or they look for, or they're constantly looking for? Balance. Hence their fear over that silly tree in Linden, they do want.
It all goes back to the tree.
Indeed, and the eagle, and the naughty eagle. Don't forget the naughty eagle.
And the naughty eagle. Yes, that's right.
Yeah. But it's and I think Sauron, the great deceiver, the great manipulator. Think about the analogy with the character of Sauron. Again, who does he represent in Tolkien's? Just think about, from a Christian perspective, you're looking for he's
right. Satan.
That little fella downstairs, doing his little naughty things. That's basically what Tolkien is trying to tell you in a nice fantastical story about what happens if you allow these things and allow these individuals to do what they love to do and what they're born to do, what they are, they're here to do in this world. So
right. Yeah. The similarities to Christian theology is when you know to look for it, it's fascinating.
Yep. Same with the works of C.S. Lewis, we both agree. Yeah,
even more so with C.S. Lewis.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the dwarves, great storyline in this season.
Yeah,
Durin, Disa, they're great.
Yeah, I love seeing them in battle too, Colin. That was cool. I had echoes of reading about the First Age, and seeing the dwarves in battle was cool. Very, very cool.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I like their armor. I like the design that Amazon went with the masks and like I guess it was it plated armor? I can't remember.
Yep.
But, great design. They're different enough from Peter Jackson's depiction of the dwarves to kind of stand on their own 2 feet as Amazon's depiction.
Yeah.
But they're close enough for you to be like,
Yeah.
It kind of it's reminiscent of what I've already seen before.
Yeah.
So great storyline, great characters. It's cool to see the Dwarven rings come into play for the first time.
Yeah.
And I really want to talk about my favorite storyline from this season, which is Celebrimbor and Annatar. But before we do that, let's just briefly, if you don't mind, let's bring up Galadriel for a second, because this is a discussion or a conversation I want to have.
I don't know where to stand on this one. Yeah, this one is so controversial, but it's as if she's gone through a metamorphosis that it's unbelievable. But then again, you consider this, right? if you're an elf, you have immortality. You're living for thousands of years. And I guess it takes you several centuries at least to become a teenager. So what are you doing during that time? Well, you're learning. What do you do after you learn? You dance around with a tree, and what do you do after that? Well, maybe learn some more. But say if you're stuck in the first age, all of that is put into fast drive, and you have to be trained to be a warrior. You men and women, you have to be able to fight off people who just want to wipe you out. Period. You got to then have negotiation skills. You got all these different new elements arriving on Middle Earth, and you got to be able to communicate with these folks and so on and so forth. So it makes sense from that perspective that Galadriel had to quickly learn how to adapt to the new environment she was found herself in. Her brother got killed fighting off the big bads. The Noldor, the branch of the Elves that came back to Middle Earth for a reason. The Jewels, the Cimmerils. Watch this space, the First Age. Anyway, she had to train and basically become something that she wasn't given the luxury to, as she was portrayed in the Third Age and Peter Jackson's movies in Lorien, and just do these strange, slow things and talk about she could have been the big bad and could have been doing this and could be doing that, but she chose not to.
Right.
And I think to see her depiction in the Second Age is a brave move. I think it's an interesting depiction to see the way she deals with conflict. And I think you got to remember, this is an elf. If you're looking at them living for thousands and thousands of years, she's in the middle age period, her middle age, our 30s and 40s. And so she's like, I know enough, so I want to kick some ass. But at the same time, I also don't know enough. These really big decisions, I'm going to make deference to people who are a little bit senior to me, Celebrimbor and maybe Elrond and other folks.
Gil-galad.
Yeah, but it's interesting, and I think personally, I know there's been a lot of kickback and pushback on her depiction, but to a degree, I think it works.
I'm inclined to agree with you. I never hated her, even back during season 1. I know that she was absolutely bombarded with negative comments and
the context.
People hated her.
The context. What is the context? The context is we in our world, not the Middle Earth, but in our world, we're living in a ongoing culture war.
Right.
And is it any wonder that's now percolated into the realms in which we like to take ourselves away from the culture war? And so when people see, for example, a strong female lead, they believe it's part of the culture war. If they see a strong male lead, they believe it's part of the culture war. And here we are, the works of Tolkien. He's harking back to a time, a fantasy time when the culture war did not exist. And so sometimes we got to set our present day isms to the side and then enjoy the story for what it is, not for what we interpret it to be, for what it is. That's just my take on it. So
no, I think you're absolutely correct, because I just want to enjoy Tolkien.
Yes, me too. Yeah.
I want to enjoy Tolkien without worrying about, this is, and I'm not going to I'm not going to go into the culture war specifics, but I just want to set all that aside and just watch my Tolkien show, read my Tolkien book, and just be happy and enjoy it.
Yeah.
And
what I don't want is Warhammer. I don't want Tolkien to become Warhammer, where everything's just doom and gloom and everything is just like, oh bloody hell, why bother? But
that's what we love about Tolkien, right? He always offers a little bit of hope, a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, always.
Yep.
I think it's what Aragorn says in the Lord of the Rings trilogy when he's talking to Haleth, son of Hama, when he's like, this is a good sword. He's swinging it around, and he tells him, "There's always hope."
Yes, and it's once again to use if you look at the context. C.S. Lewis, Tolkien, two big buddies, lifelong friends. They're both super Christian, and then both of them wanted to portray in their works a vision, if you will, about how to live a good life. Yes, there's always going to be good folks. Yes, there's going to be bad folks. It's how you deal with those decisions in your time and what you do in your time, not basically, listen to whatever is the sound of the moment and think it's great to be naughty all the time, or it's great to be deceitful all the time. But just, step back and think about, is this a right decision or is this a bad decision? Is this a right move? Is this a bad move? And so on and so forth. Yeah. And
it all kind of stems back to what Gandalf said in the book Fellowship of the Ring and in the movie. All you have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to you.
Exactly.
So I feel like we're kind of building up toward Celebrimbor and Annatar, but before we get there, I know I said we would do it after Galadriel, but I forgot there's a couple of other characters who we can just maybe focus on for just a couple of minutes. We mentioned Adar already during our opening segment. I think we both said we were pleased with Sam Hazeldene's performance, stepping into the role, making it his own, while kind of also, hearkening back to the way Joseph Mawle had played it. What do we make of him at the end? Ultimately, he's killed by his own orcs after Sauron corrupts them.
Yeah, which is kind of fascinating. But what can I say that you and I, once again, have had conversations about this, the nature of orcs. The nature of orcs changes from age to age to age. And so is there really, you can make that blanket statement, all orcs bad? I think the season 2 is trying to give you, at least put that little plant, the seed of a germ of an idea in your head, where it's like, well, not all orcs really agreed with each other 100% of the time. And perhaps they had their own motivations, their own desires, if you will, and their own, needs. I mean, if you look at the books and the conversation in the second book, I think it was the between two orc factions, one from Mordor and one from Saruman's guys.
Yes.
And they're talking about, remember the good old days, the good old days where we didn't have the big leaders and we could do what we wanted to do.
I have to look this up.
Yeah, and they were like, I remember those days too. Yeah, and well, it could be like that again. We don't need these big guys telling us what to do. And I think similarly, in the Second Age, we look at now that there are little divisions within the orcs and how they're portrayed, and some of them, as personified by Adar, don't want to go down the road in which, the big leaders are telling them to go continuously on a warpath and loot and murder and all the rest of it. And then the others are swayed, obviously, by the power, the magnetism of Sauron, and then earlier by Morgoth, to always continuously be in this posture of killing and looting and whatever other naughty things they would do on a continuous basis. So I think it's kind of interesting. I think it needs to be explored more. Will they do it? I'm not sure.
Well, now that Adar is gone, which I was not expecting for him to be gone so early in this story, but I
think it was inevitable, don't you think?
I mean, I knew he was gonna die at some point. I just at the end of season 2, I just wasn't foreseeing it.
Yeah.
It was very interesting to see him back in his elf form when he put on the ring.
Which actually is kind of cool, because first age knowledge once again. Where do the orcs come from? Think about it.
Elves.
Exactly. And so here we are. We have this wonderful time, this imagery of once, Adar puts on this ring, the ring of Galadriel, he's suddenly transformed because of the ring. What's the properties you associate with the elves? Balance. Everything being in balance. Once he puts on this ring of Galadriel, suddenly his orcish appearances, his orcish, the way he even thinks, disappears. He's going back to what he was prior to the, when he was captured by Morgoth. And so, that's what is a stark reminder of how this all began for the race of the orcs. And once again, it's also giving you a little inkling of what could be if that type of power was used for the orcs. But be that as it may, what can I say?
So Adar is gone.
Yeah.
R.I.P. But I said this, I have said this before. I think he is a great original character to the Rings of Power series.
Yep.
To me, just a very cool concept of, hey, let's depict one of the earliest orcs, Uruk, as he prefers to be called.
Yeah. But did you know, Colin, in the East, there was actually, after the fall of Morgoth, and when Sauron decided to come back in a big way, there were orcs who disagreed with him. Yeah.
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah,
No.
it's interesting, don't you think? And when finally, after he sent his lieutenants and got them back in the fold, they did so under duress. At the first opportunity, they would run away and go back to what they were doing originally. So I give it once again another inkling of how there wasn't that unanimity you think there is, within the various tribes of the Orcs. Yeah, so I mean, it'd be interesting for me to explore that a little bit further. Perhaps we will, in seasons 3, 4, and 5, because we do know in the east we have another wizard running around. We do know he was responsible, a blue wizard. He was responsible for basically leading the insurrection, leading the resistance to the rise of Sauron. He was responsible for getting the various human tribes out there to resist, and if they did, get coerced into helping Sauron, they did so under duress. So the first opportunity, they would run away. So yeah, I think there's lots of potential out there, personally. Dumbfounded.
I just, this is a question that's been plaguing me ever since I saw this season 2 finale. And it's, if the Orcs were so in love with their father, Adar, from the very beginning, he, for a time, killed Sauron, gave the Orcs a home in Mordor.
He wasn't the only one. All the Orcs helped kill Sauron. He put the thing on, the
crown.
Then the rest of the Orcs all joined in and started, because they wanted.
That's right. Yes,
they wanted to kill him at the end of that season 1 episode. Season 1, season 2, they wanted to kill that particular leader of their resistance to, the glorious forces of light from the west.
Okay.
And they wanted to get rid of Sauron because he was suggesting they continue the fight, and they were like, hell no, we've had enough of this, Malacca. We want to go and do what we like to do, just hang out and just have a good time now and again.
So I guess my question is, since Adar gave them a good life, or a better life than they would have had under Sauron, why did they turn against Adar at the end of this season and follow Sauron?
That's a great question. I don't know what the answer is. I suspect maybe some of them may have seen what Adar had turned back into, and they were a little bit suspicious. Or maybe, because it was alluded to, I remember, during the siege of, what's the
Eärien?
Eärien. Many of them were a little bit upset because Adar was telling them things that was contrary to everything he had promised beforehand. He was now saying, you have to destroy the city, and you have to, kill, because Sauron's inside there. And they were like, hold on a minute, maybe, this is not what we really wanted to do. And
there were seeds of discord.
Yes, and so Sauron comes on the scene, starts doing what he's perfectly able to do, has done time and time again. He starts to sow the seeds of dissension, and he basically, before you know it, he tells them something. He made them an offer they can't refuse, and that's it. It's over. Because that's what he does. He makes people, offers they can't refuse most of the time to get his way. And after that, what happened? Well, you know what happened. So
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Before we get to, and I feel like it's a joke at this point, we're going to talk about Annatar and Celebrimbor.
Yeah.
But just real quick, some rapid fire questions. Let's see if we can do this, because we have a couple of characters to briefly talk about before we move on. The Blue Wizard.
Loved it. Because finally we get to see a blue wizard. Yay! Right. There's 2 of them, by the way.
But he wasn't wearing blue. He was wearing white.
No, because I guess either the blue wore out, or perhaps he got corrupted. And by the way he was betrayed, he got corrupted.
In Tolkien lore, not much is known about the Blue Wizards, but is there any hint given to us that they might have gone bad?
To my knowledge, I think there was some mention of it in one of the Book of Lost Tales, where two of them, Olentia, and what was the other one?
Palando and
yeah, where there was some dissent between the two, and one went one way and the other went the other way, and perhaps there is some basis for that. I think the inference from season 2 is that perhaps the guy who is now, the leader of that faction, with the folks with the masks on their head riding the horses.
Oh, yes.
He's somehow...
The Gaudrim.
Yeah, he was somehow involved with the murder of the other one, which I don't buy, by the way. I think the other one is still alive and running around somewhere. Tom Bombadil knows, definitely. But the way he's portrayed, I think, is spot on. And I think what's interesting to me, Colin, did you catch his servants were the same people who supposedly young Gandalf killed at the season finale of season 1? They're back. And it's interesting how he's using them, I guess they're witches or some personification thereof that to achieve his own aims. I guess he knows about the presence of Sauron. Therefore, he knows about the presence of Morgoth. And I guess, because he's a Maya too, he's seeing this as an opportunity to develop his own power even further. Tom Bombadil clearly knows of him and does not like him, period. But nevertheless, Tom Bombadil doesn't feel threatened by him, which is interesting, don't you think? Because Tom Bombadil is the Yoda of the of the Tolkienverse.
That's a very very good analogy.
He is the one who has trained all these guys, so he knows their weaknesses and strengths. So, yeah, I think it's fascinating, and I think we'll be seeing a lot more of him in season 3 and definitely in 4, in my view.
Okay, so next, Theo and Arondir.
Ooh, that's a strange one. That's a very strange one.
They killed off Bronwyn, Arondir's love interest.
Yeah.
And Theo's mom.
I don't know what to make of it, to be quite frank with you. And on the one hand, Theo is, once again, he's this conflicted human character, and we don't really know where his true loyalties lie, and he's obviously, he was in the Southlands, and he remembers, or he knows of how great it could be with the big baddie. But at the same time, he's being shown an alternative, via these elven folks, and particularly the one character who's had some type of association with his mummy, that maybe it's not as bad as it could be. So I don't know. He's a conflicted character, and I think you will see a combination of that, I think, in season 3, perhaps. Yeah.
Do you think the elf Arondir is Theo's father?
Maybe.
It's possible.
Yeah. Very possible. It won't be the first time, interspecies, hanky-panky, so it won't be the last time either. So.
What about seeing Ents again?
That was great. I have a question for you, Colin. Did you think one of them, that was that episode where, you get to see the Ents and then you hear a female Ent voice? You think that was a female Entwife?
It was indeed an Entwife, yes.
Yay. So maybe in season 3, then, you are going to see what actually happens to the Entwives.
I think that is I think it's a strong possibility that the showrunners are going to explore what happened to the Entwives.
Because you go on the internet, you start poking around, and then you see, well, this is how Sauron deals with the Entwives, and he does it.
All these fan theories out there
in such a dastardly way. It's you got tears in your eyes. So, but
okay. No, I thought it was great being able to see not just the Ents again, but having an introduction to an actual Entwife, which is, as a lifelong Tolkien Lord of the Rings fan, I always remember Treebeard talking about how we lost the Entwives. Yeah. So being able to see one was just really cool. I think Tom
Bombadil knows where they are. I think they're in the Old Forest.
You think so?
I think so, yeah. Well, if they're not there, they're definitely in the West, where everybody wants to go to, but no one can go to.
I feel like we have to mention probably the most talked about, most hated thing in the entire season, and that's the Elrond Galadriel kiss.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that, to be quite frank with you.
I had to bring it up for the internet. It's just nobody seemed to like that.
What did you think of that?
When it first happened, I was like, okay, this is very strange. I don't know why they're doing this. Maybe because some fans shipped it and they wanted to give the fans what they wanted. But if you watch it again, you can see in one of the wider shots that while he is kissing Galadriel farewell, he's handing her the pin from his or the brooch from his cloak, which she uses to pick the lock.
Okay.
So it's like, did you really need this dramatic kiss to cover that up? So I mean, I don't know. I have a question about Arondir, because in the final moments of the second to last episode, Adar runs Arondir through.
Yeah.
And yet in the next episode, Arondir's fine.
I guess he's a super elf.
He might be.
He had a little lembas bread. He got a little bit of that, and he was ready to rock and roll again. But I don't know. It was kind of silly. But then again, that's fiction. You got to suspend your your logical faculties now.
Got to suspend your disbelief.
Indeed,
just to enjoy what is before you.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Now let's talk about Annatar and Celebrimbor, which I think is the best storyline.
It was, yeah. And to see the way in which, Celebrimbor finally, at the end, he's like, oh, I realize I've invited the big bad in my home, and I've given him all this power, and he's really corrupted me, and look what he's done to my kingdom, and he's destroying my people and my city. Like, oh, bleeding hell. What am I going to do about it? And he realizes he can't do that much, so his feeble attempts at trying to change that balance, it was interesting.
I got to say, before season 2 came out, I watched the trailers, and very early on they show you that Annatar looks very much like Halbrand. So obviously Celebrimbor, again, this is without seeing any of season 2 except for the promotional material. Obviously Celebrimbor knew that Annatar was Halbrand, and I said to myself, how in the world are they going to pull this off?
Yeah.
Because Celebrimbor has seen Halbrand in season 1.
Yep.
So how is he going to be dumb enough to let Halbrand into his workshop, his city, and
maybe
pull the wool over his eyes?
Yeah, maybe Colin, Tolkien, who indeed is the germ of these ideas which inspired season 2, maybe Tolkien is trying to tell us something in that, perhaps don't always follow this notion that, from great deeds come great plans for the world and all the rest of it. And
sure.
The creation of these rings of power, which is the whole notion of the series, talking about the Second Age, is to tell you, it's a cautionary tale. It's telling you that these magical things that you aspire to do, in the Elves instance, to seek balance, in the Dwarf instance, greed, and in the human instance, power, all of which can corrupt. And indeed they do in the Second Age. And it percolates into the Third Age, but it's, I think for me, that's the tales, if you want to, take it, that's the knowledge you can gain from this. And Tolkien has created this fantasy where you're seeing it portrayed in a TV series, which there's nothing bad about that. I think it's, the Chinese have their legends and their fairy tales, and the Indians too, and I think their great Mahabharata and the tales of what happens between the various factions there, and then the Chinese, and the tale of with the 12 kingdoms and whatnot. Yeah, it's a tale for the masses to look at, to think about, and then to ruminate, and then say, okay, that's the way I should live my life. Yes, there's going to be greed. Yes, there's going to be bad things. But if I live a good, solid life and try to do the best thing every day, perhaps I'll be a good person. Maybe I get to the afterlife too. But I think Tolkien was trying to recreate that. And what he said, that was his goal. He looked at the various Norse myths and the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans, everyone else, says, I want to create something for the Anglo-Saxon peoples, and also tell them that, this is your legends. This is what happened back in the day, and so on and so forth. Yeah, I think it's kind of cool. All in all, season 2, thumbs up for me.
What would you give it on a scale of 1 to 10?
Ooh. Well, there's some episodes I like much better than others. I would say 6, maybe 7. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I would give it a 6 as well.
Yeah.
I want to give it a 7, but there are still some problems that I kind of cannot ignore.
Yeah,
so,
like the ones your sister and I talk about. They're they're definitely a problem. But that just requires a good editing and a different take on certain story aspects. But, who knows? We got like another several seasons in which they can get their act together. We do know in the pipeline they have to portray the fall of Númenor. We do know they have to portray the siege of Mordor. We do know they have to portray how a lot of these leaders, which were told about in the Lord of the Rings, how they come to their end. So yeah, it's it's going to be interesting. We haven't been told hitherto about these wandering two female hobbits mucking about, with a young Gandalf.
Yeah, it almost seems like they're gone.
That is new territory, a new domain. So who knows? Yeah.
At the end of Gandalf's storyline in this season, it almost seems like Nori is leaving him.
Almost, yeah.
So I don't know what the future plans are.
I don't know. I suspect the writers will, pull out something from their behind, and
maybe
they're back.
I gotta say before we close out this video, this is a problem that I have with this show, and I recently did a complete rewatch of Game of Thrones.
Yay! Well done, Colin.
Thank you.
Even the last season.
Even the last season.
Wow.
And it is at times it was rough, but I noticed how the showrunners for Game of Thrones, David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, they pretty much wrote, I would say, and I'm sure I'm getting the percentage wrong, but let's just say they wrote about 90% of the episodes themselves. And for a good majority of the show of Game of Thrones, it is some consistently good storytelling.
Yep.
But I've noticed that in The Rings of Power, the showrunners, J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay, they only write the finale episodes. And they only write occasionally a premiere episode, which they did in season 1, I believe. And they sprinkle in other writers throughout the rest of the seasons. So I feel like that might be why this show lacks consistent storytelling.
Yeah, I think you're right, Colin. Yeah, you're right.
It would be nice to see the showrunners just write the whole thing.
Yeah.
And
see what they really have in there, the upstairs, department, and what they can do, because let's think about it. They've been given a whole era of the Tolkien universe and told by Mr. Bezos, go do it. I want my own Game of Thrones. Go do it. And what they've given us, two hobbits were mucking about with a young wizard, and they storylines that kind of are lacking in, what the heck are we going to do with this character, and what are we going to do with this love interest, and so on and so forth, and yet it's wasted potential. If they had someone decent, like the dude who I understand wanted to be involved, the one who's now doing the follow-up or the prequel to the Game of Thrones, the lead writer for the House of Dragon.
Oh, I haven't heard about this.
Yeah, apparently he may have been involved, but he was given the cold shoulder. So yeah, I do agree with you. You make a good point. Having some continuity in terms of the writer and how they're moving one plot device to the next plot device, and this character act and that character act, yeah, that would have made a big difference. You got to remember, though, the caveat, though, Colin, is that the George Martin wrote, the Game of Thrones.
Right.
He wrote the House of Dragon. And so there's lots of lore and lots of character acts already to draw upon and whereas this, what we have been seeing, it's basically some appendices, some little mini stories here and there, but nothing of substantive nature in which you're following the arc from this particular character perspective or that particular. We do know overall what takes place, but we don't know how it got there, altogether. Apart from, that one thing we both have been following, and that's the corruption of the humans and the elves and the dwarves and by who, so.
I was talking to John last night, who was on Saga Sessions for the Nosferatu review and breakdown, and he called The Rings of Power fan fiction. So some people might agree with John. I can see where he's coming from. He's not a big fan. But I still enjoy it, and I will continue to watch it. And I'm glad somebody is out there adapting Tolkien's work.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it's, for me, it's just, it's not the beginning, it's not the end, but it is kind of cool to see an adaptation of the Tolkien world in we're going into 3 seasons now. And yeah, it's great, and because there's a lot you could do with that. And I'm not talking about, drawing in modern parallels, but there's a lot you could do with what we do know about it. There's like so much we haven't been showed yet about what's taking place, what will be taking place down south, with the southern kingdoms. I'm not talking about what used to be called the Southlands. I'm talking about Harador and the Haradrim And then, of course,
Yes.
you go up, on the other side of the Mordor and the Easterlings and all the others in the Sea of Run and all that. Yeah, there's a lot going on there too. So maybe we will explore that with the other Blue Wizard. Who knows? I hope they do.
Yes. I got to say, this is just my closing thought.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of just like a side thing, but I really loved how the showrunners utilized the title of The Lord of the Rings in this season because, again, I'm kind of going on a little side tangent, but I always loved this in season 2. When Annatar first reveals himself to Celebrimbor and he says, I can make you the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And then when Celebrimbor is dying, riddled with arrows from Annatar, a.k.a. Sauron, Celebrimbor realizes, no, it is you who are the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. Cool. I like that too.
I think it was well written.
It was. Well, yeah, which ties into what you were just saying. If that type of acuity of vision, acuity of writing had been constant throughout the episodes, perhaps it would have been much, much more richer. But unfortunately, as you said, they decided they peaked a little noses at the end and then at the beginning, and the rest is like, okay, who wants to write this one then? Well, who wants to write that one?
That's pretty much the route
Yeah.
they take when it comes
Yeah.
to writing these episodes, and I
Yeah.
don't know why they do it, but
Yeah.
oh well. Well,
I'm baffled.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely an interesting decision, creative decision.
Yeah.
But Andrew gives it a 6 out of a 10. I give it a 6 out of a 10. I call it a successful season.
Yes.
I look forward to season 3.
Want more? Yeah.
Assuming they produce season 3, there hasn't been an official renewal yet, but
Mm-hmm.
it hasn't been canceled at least.
No.
So we'll just have to sit tight and
Yeah.
cross our fingers and hope for the best. Anyways, I want to thank you guys first of all, I want to thank Andrew for joining me.
You're welcome, Colin. Long
this video.
time no see, no hear. And the last time I was talking to this young man was, well, a long time ago. That's another tale for another time.
That's right.
Yeah.
So thank you all for attending this saga session. We
Thank
hope
you.
to see you again soon.
Bye.